Is better there? Hello? No. Do we have another microphone? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Today we are making history. The main mayoral candidates will speak directly to our Latin community. Today these two candidates are coming here to pay attention to our concerns and to answer our questions as Kansas City citizens. She is a current councilwoman for the District 4 of Kansas City. There, she has been playing roles like the chair of the airport committee, co-chair of the legislative committee, and vice chair of the finance committee, as well as a member of the other committees like the transportation and infrastructure, the city market oversight, and the Midtown Housing Advisory Board. She is also a former member of the Missouri State Senate, and as her opponent, she is a lawyer. He is a current councilman representing the 3rd District of Kansas City, as well as a law school professor at the University of Kansas. He chairs the City Council Housing Committee and is also a member of committees like the Airport, Planning and Zoning and Economic Development, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and Neighborhoods and Public Safety. Let's welcome our candidates that will face off each other to gain the mayor's seat, Jolie Justus and Quinton Lucas. Let me explain how this forum will work. I will be making the questions here, and each candidate have 2 minutes to answer the question, followed by a clarification in case it is necessary. These questions I have here are all made by our Hispanic community, media, and organizations. At the end of the forum, if we have enough time, we will give you, the audience, the opportunity to make their own questions to the candidates. Now, each candidate will have the chance to make their opening statement or introduction. Ladies first, Jolie Justus.
Thank you. Good evening. It's so good to be back here tonight, and we just really appreciate the Guadalupe Center opening your doors time and time again, whether it's for neighborhood meetings or important discussions like we're having here tonight. So thank you very much. It's really great to be here with you. You know, I've seen a lot of change and a lot of progress in Kansas City over the last 8 years. And one of the things that I've seen as I've been working in this city is that we still have a whole lot of work to do, because until that progress and that success is felt in every single neighborhood, our work is not done. Over the course of this campaign, I've actually had the opportunity to walk the entire length of this city. I started down at 163rd and Prospect. I walked all the way across the city to 144th and Interurban Road, which is north of the airport. And as I walked across the city, and as I met with people throughout the neighborhoods of all of Kansas City, I keep hearing over and over again 3 main things. Number 1, our crime rate is too high. We are not safe in this city, and we need to get that right. Number 2, we have some basic things that we need to worry about when it comes to streets, when it comes to sidewalks, when it comes to picking up trash, and we're not getting that right now. And then the last thing is making sure that we have educational opportunities and job opportunities for everyone in our city in every single neighborhood. And so that's why I'm running for mayor of Kansas City right now, because for the last 13 years, first as your state senator and now as your city council person, these are the issues that I've been working on. These are the things that I've been getting done. Whether it's big picture issues like building a new single terminal airport to make sure that we have people going to work and continuing to grow our city, or fixing the sidewalk right outside that was crumbling for years where people were falling and breaking their arm. These are the types of things that you need from the next mayor of Kansas City, and that's why I'm excited to say that as the next mayor of Kansas City, I'm actually going to take City Hall and bring it to your neighborhood. I'm going to make sure that I am there answering your questions and tackling these tough issues. I've been doing it for 13 years, I've been getting things done, and I look forward to continuing to work with you in your neighborhood to keep this city moving forward.
Thank you, candidate. Quinton Lucas.
Hello. Para triunfar juntos tenemos que crecer. Hi, I'm Quentin Lucas. I'm happy to be back here today. I'm happy to spend time with you today again. I'm born and raised in Kansas City, was raised by a single mother on the east side of Kansas City, and very close to here. And I'm running for mayor to make sure that we're delivering the basic services that you need. It's good to see some of my friends here who needed a dumpster for a neighborhood cleanup at 27th and Jarboe. I was happy, although I don't live in this district, to be able to get that for them. I've been happy to talk about bus service, to see how we can get better bus routes along 27th Street and throughout our community. And more importantly, I want to make sure we work with small businesses to make sure they have opportunities to grow here, to hire people from our neighborhoods, to make sure that we have a positive future. Over our next 2 hours, we'll have a chance to answer a lot of questions about the future of Kansas City. But to me, the idea is basically this. How do we make sure that we have a city with great momentum, but momentum that is shared throughout communities, throughout neighborhoods? It's not good enough to have a growing downtown or to gentrify neighborhoods if we're not actually taking care of the people in our neighborhoods, making sure that people can age in place, making sure that people can stay, and making sure that young people have a Kansas City that they can come back to and be proud of. I look forward to talking to you. Thank you to the Guadalupe Centers for hosting us, and we'll have a great time tonight.
Thank you, candidate. Jolie Justus, why should the Hispanic community make you their next mayor?
That's a great question. You know, for the last, I've mentioned 13 years, I've been working with the Hispanic community on several different issues. It started, frankly, when I first went into the state Senate, and I had a group of amazing dreamers who came to me and said, you know what? We should be able to go to school. We graduated from Missouri high schools. We are born and bred in this state, and we wanted to make sure that we can go to our state university. So we filed the DREAM Act every single year. And we made sure that we had opportunities for young people. But it didn't stop there, because I'm also the director of pro bono legal services at my law firm. And one of the things that we've done is team up with our social service agencies across the city, making sure that we provide services from immigration to landlord-tenant to helping small businesses get off the ground and grow. These are things that I've been doing nonstop for the last 13 years in this community. I'm going to make sure that we have also representation at City Hall, on all of our boards and commissions across the entire city that represents our community. For too long, we look at City Hall and we don't see a community that looks like us. And one of the things that we have to make sure that we do is, whether it's judges, whether it's members of the park board, whether it's members of all of the different agencies that are making incredibly important decisions about the future of this community, we need representation from the Hispanic community. And that's something that I'm committed to doing, because it's something that I've been doing my entire professional career. And that's why I'm looking forward to working with you to make sure that we stand shoulder to shoulder to continue to address these issues. And I know that we can keep the city moving forward together.
Candidate, what are you going to do differently than you did in your career?
For me?
It's for Jolie Justice.
I'm sorry, tell me the question again.
What are you going to do in case you were elected as mayor to differently than you did in your career?
So what am I going to do that's different?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that's incredibly exciting right now is that when you're a city council person or when you're a state senator, you have a lot of opportunities to legislate, to appropriate, and to make those sorts of decisions. What I'm excited about in this executive role as your next mayor of Kansas City is I'm actually going to be able to do some of the things that I haven't been able to do. Let me give you an example. When I was in the state Senate, the governor came to me and said, you know what? I would like to see Latino representation on the police board. I would like to see Latino representation at the Kansas City Election Board. And so I went into the community and I met with folks and I said, all right, let's come up with some people who are going to come forward and serve in that capacity. Well, I took those to the governor, and unfortunately, the governor came back and said, well, I've chosen someone else. I'm excited to be the executive because I'm going to be able to finally say, you know what? I get to make those decisions. And I want a community that is represented by all of us. And so I'm really looking forward to taking the next step, not just as a legislator, but as an executive, and making sure that we have those types of decisions being made at the highest level.
Candidate Lucas, thank you, Candidate Justice. Candidate Lucas, why Hispanics should vote for you?
I think it's very simple. It's because I listen. I don't pretend to come in knowing everything and every need in every community. How do you learn those things? You talk to people. You listen. You learn about their issues. When I got elected to city council, I had the opportunity to make a lot of choices for my staff. I only have one staff member. That's a Latina. She speaks Spanish. She works well with communities throughout Kansas City, the Northeast, the West Side, Northland, and South Kansas City. The reason was simple, because I wanted to make sure if somebody called my office, they always knew how they could get help. And that's what we made sure we did. When I learned about new economic development projects that were looking to change the face of the West Side, I listened to the community once again. Even though it's not the district I live in, I heard a lot of people who said, we want to make sure our community gets to continue to have the character that we've known for years. We want to make sure that we're not displaced by big economic development. And I was proud to stand with the community in that situation. Time and time again, I've been somebody who listens to this community. I've been somebody who cares. I've been somebody who's tried to work hard. Because frankly, I recognize that there are a lot of similarities from my life story and perhaps some of yours. I know what it's like to have been an outsider. I know what it's like to sometimes have City Hall not be responsive to some of the basic needs of your community. That's what I'll be able to do as mayor, to be able to push those types of issues, to not talk about appointing people, but to put them into key positions, as I've done in my 3rd District at-large seat, as I've done in my office each day, as I do with my staff. And that's what we need at City Hall, not more talk, but more action in terms of how we help our neighborhoods, from the most basic issue to the most important appointment at City Hall.
Thank you. Candidate Justice, if you were elected mayor, what will you do to ensure diversity in the appointment to boards and commissions, in particular, that Hispanics are appointed at the same level as other minority groups?
Well, we're talking about a lot of the same thing tonight, and so I do want to continue, though, and talk a little bit more about the importance of this. So over the years, we have seen opportunities come and opportunities go. We have seen a lot of talk, and we've seen a lot of promises, and we don't see a lot of follow-through. And one of the things that you know about me, because I've been here with you in the community for the last 13 years, is that when I say I'm going to do something, I follow through with it. I have met with many of you on a monthly basis. I have, when I have found a problem in the neighborhood where we don't have basic city services coming in, I've brought the city to you, going over to the Tony Aguirre Center and sitting down and saying, you know what, let's solve these problems together. This is what you can expect from me, but you can't do it if you don't have representation that looks and feels like the community. And so one of the things that I'm excited about is this is exactly what I've been doing for the last 13 years as an elected official. And you're going to continue to see this from me on a regular basis, because I want to make sure that whether you're walking into the courthouse or whether you're walking into a Parks Board meeting or you're walking into the mayor's office, I want to make sure that you see representation that reflects the community. But more importantly, I want to bring City Hall to you. I want to take us out of the 29th floor into the neighborhoods, making sure that we're listening and solving problems, because the number one thing that you need from your next mayor is someone who's going to follow through on their promises.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Lucas, do you have any plans to guarantee diversity in the city boards and commissions focused on the Latino community?
Exactly, yes. I think there are a few different ways to guarantee diversity. The first thing, and it's a saying that I hear a lot, is that not all skin folk are kinfolk. And what does that mean? What it means is you can't just get somebody who looks like you, but who's never involved in the community, who's never engaged. You need to make sure you're actually getting people from different neighborhoods, from different backgrounds, that we don't just have boards of, let's say, different groups or commissions that are a bunch of lawyers, for example. Right? We need to make sure that we're listening to more people every day. So that's what I'm going to guarantee. And more to the point, I want to do appointments differently. It doesn't need to just be the mayor's office has to fill a bunch of appointments and then we kind of come up with an idea and maybe we ask one or two groups. I want to walk through neighborhoods. I want to talk to more people. I want some of you who have never had a position at City Hall to have the opportunity to come in and serve. And I think that's vital to what we're doing differently. Because when I think about how I grew up, I was raised by a single mother, worked hard every day of her life, was never somebody who was hanging in and around City Hall. People like her were underrepresented. I think a lot of people that you may know in your families are underrepresented. If they don't have time to come to a debate like this, or if they don't know everything that's happening, I want to make those opportunities more concrete for our city. And I'll say this too. We have a lot of boards that do important things, from how we plan the future of our city, to how we plan out our bus routes, to how we actually take care of our infrastructure every day. The district we're sitting in now needs to have folks who understand infrastructure needs on the west side. They need to understand infrastructure needs for folks who are just getting by every day, who are walking to work every day, walking to their bus. And that's what I'm going to make sure we do in terms of appointments. We'll make sure we have a diverse group, and I'll make this final point. Sometimes they're difficult conversations and fights. I told you about my office assistant who's Latina. That angered some black folks, as you might imagine. But what I told them was, it's important that we make sure everybody's represented. That fight I had 4 years ago is the same one I'll have as mayor.
Thank you. Candidate Justice, in order to help combat the stereotypes that exist, such as all Hispanics are undocumented, want handouts, and don't pay taxes, what is not true, what is your strategy to help foster an environment of inclusive diversity?
It's a great question, and I appreciate it, and it's actually something that we talk about on a daily basis when you are in the space of leading, as we both are, obviously. You know, the first thing that we have to do is have more conversations. And we have to make sure, feeding back into the last question, that we are represented at every level, whether it's the city council, whether it's boards and commissions, whether it is making sure that we are lifting up our small businesses. So how do we do that? Well, number one, we need to start getting more resources to the communities that are able to start sharing stories. I think that's incredibly important. But number two, I think it's also important to make sure that we have neighborhoods where everybody succeeds so that we can start to break down these stereotypes. Too many times we all get this impression, and I think a lot of people think this about Kansas City, that the Latino community is only located in the west side or the northeast. But that's not our community. We have Latino community throughout the entire city. And so one of the things that we have to continue to do is really create an environment where everybody can succeed. We need to make sure that we get tools into the hands of individuals, including small businesses, so that we can keep the city moving forward. When we do that, when we provide resources, when we provide tools, when we allow people to tell stories, we start to break down those stereotypes, and we have to continue it. You also need someone who understands what's happening at the state level, and you need someone who understands what's happening at the federal level. Because for too long, this conversation has been divisive, and it's not getting any better. And when I was in Jefferson City, there were times when you would come down to Jefferson City on Lobby Day, where you would only have 2 or 3 representatives who would meet with you. You need someone who understands and who can stand shoulder to shoulder with you to share this message that these stereotypes are wrong, and we're not going to stand for it as a city in Kansas City.
Do you have any plan to address that plan? To
Absolutely.
break the stereotypes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things we do is we continue to walk together into Jefferson City, into Washington, D.C., and we break down those stereotypes by introducing individuals and telling personal stories. Too often we hear just complete blanket generalizations. And one of the things that we do is that we need to make sure we're lifting up the stories and saying, no, you are wrong. And every time we see injustice, every time we see inequity, stand up, don't sit quietly, but stand up and say, no, this is not true. This is Kansas City and not the experience that you're describing right now.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Lucas, I will repeat the question. In order to help combat the stereotypes that exist, such as all Hispanic are undocumented, want handouts, and don't pay taxes, what is your strategy to help foster an environment of inclusive diversity?
Yeah, whenever I hear those types of statements and stereotypes, I think they're ridiculous, right? When I was growing up, there were a lot of folks that talked about black women as all on welfare or anything of that sort. It was insulting, it was incorrect, it negated how hard so many people worked every day. And I think we continue to see that too often, that people presume what they know a community to be without ever talking to people from that community. So a few concrete things that I would do, and you can go to my website, quentinlucas.org, and we have a conversation about it now. I'm proposing the opportunity for municipal ID cards for people, regardless of status, to have an opportunity to get things like jobs, to get access to housing, to break down some of the barriers that are in the way every day to people being able to get opportunities and get ahead in Kansas City. Other things that I'm proposing are making sure that we increase our access to affordable housing in more parts of our city. Because Councilwoman Justice is right. The Latino community is not just in one part of Kansas City. The more we can create opportunities for people to become homeowners, to actually build wealth in their communities, to be stable in communities, that's key. And one other thing I'll note, and I'm glad we're at Guadalupe Centers now to talk about it. We have to support educational institutions, both our public schools and charter schools, that often not only are training young people, but are also actually working with their parents and families to make sure that they're able to succeed in Kansas City, to succeed in life. And then I guess I'll just make this final point, which is we talk about difficult conversations. My difficult conversations in life have been in Kansas City, not Jefferson City. But I think you have to have them more often in Kansas City. Too often in the district I represent, I have people that are kind of afraid of new folks from the Hispanic community. Right? There are lots of African Americans who say, well, what, is this a competition for jobs? We need to talk about how this is building opportunity for everyone. The more jobs we can create, the more opportunities we create, the better our community, black, white, Latino, etc., is going to be. And that's what I'm working on as mayor.
Thank you. The next question, let's change the order. So you will be first.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you in support of changing the current city council districts from 6 districts to 9 districts? This will mean 3 at-large seats opposed to 6.
So in connection with changing the number of city council districts to 9 as compared to the 12 we have now, I had the fortune of dealing with this issue before. Short answer is actually yes. I think it's an interesting and good idea. I served on the Charter Review Commission some years ago with Andrea Boo, who is a lawyer here in town as well and is here now. And our goal was this, to make sure we can get better representation of more communities in Kansas City. Right now with 6 districts, we don't actually get the most diversity. I think we all saw the story in the newspaper, and many of us knew it before. We have not had a Latino on the city council for an excess of, 25 years now? And that's too long. And we need to create more opportunities to have diversity, not just in our appointments, but we don't want people just relying on us. I want better competition in the city council seats, and I think that's what we can do. We can still retain our at-larges, right? You still have 3, but you have the opportunity to get better representation of all communities in Kansas City, and I think that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Justice?
Yes, so I think this is a great idea, and I look forward to starting that conversation, frankly, from the get-go. You know, we had a charter review commission when the last mayor took office, and we need another one, I believe, every 8 years. I think that it's important that we continue to grow as a city. And one of the things that I want to do is make sure that we have that conversation immediately, because we've got some really important things happening with the census coming up. And I want to make sure that we have some hard decisions made on the number of seats, on the number of at-large versus in-district. I also want to have some hard conversations about how we're going to be doing the redistricting. I want to make sure that we have voices at the table for when we get the census data back, that we are actually redistricting things based on facts and data and not strictly on politics. And I think that's critically important that we have that in place before the census takes place. But at the same time, we're going to have to fight like heck to make sure that the census is done in a manner that collects the data that we need. And I have real concerns right now about what's happening in Washington, D.C. So we need to be keenly aware of what's going on there, but we also need to make sure that even as it's happening, that we have safeguards in place to make sure that we have representation of every community on our city council, because we haven't been able to get it right yet. So I think that's one thing that we need to do immediately is that Charter Review Commission. This needs to be a part of it. I think there's a lot of things that need to be a part of it, though. I think we need to talk about things relating to, frankly, how we're going to keep this city moving forward when it comes to issues of initiative petitions, when it comes to issues of control of the police department. We need to have conversations about all of these things, because these are the issues that are critical and really what make the difference between the quality of life of our neighborhoods all over this city.
Thank you. Lucas, if you were elected, what are those 3 steps will you take to put our Hispanic community on a firmer financial footing?
3 steps. I'll say them quickly and then we can talk about them later. Housing, jobs, and education. Just simple as that. Let's start with housing. What do we do to make sure that there are more housing opportunities, particularly for hardworking, working-class families in Kansas City? A place where sometimes I've disagreed with how we're doing things at City Hall is that we've liked to do lots of incentives for luxury development. We've done a lot of tax breaks to help build houses for fancy lawyers like us, but not regular working folks with families like you. And what I want to make sure we're doing is when we talk about housing policy, we're talking about how we can get more people into single-family homes, how we can get more people from renting to home ownership. Because, you know, what I've seen in the 3rd District that I represent, 3rd District is, for now, still majority black. But lots of the new people in our community are Hispanic. And lots of them have invested in streets like Spruce and Benton and others, where we're seeing a resurgence. We're seeing rehabs of homes. We're seeing children running around for the first time in a while. I want to see us do more of that. Jobs, what do we do in connection with that? With jobs, I want to make sure that we're attracting more jobs to the core of the city, those that are accessible on public transit lines. I mean, I was doing some research before this debate, and I saw to catch a bus from the Northeast Library to here takes 44 minutes. And when you start to think about how long it takes for somebody to get to work, we need to make sure that we're creating jobs that are accessible to Kansas Cityans. When I talk about a bus route on 27th Street, we need to talk about how perhaps you can get a job at KU Hospital, but be able to live here and get there efficiently and back. That's vital. And then finally, on education. We need to make sure we're working with our educational institutions in our city. We need to work with the Kansas City Public Schools. We need to work with our charter schools and so many others to make sure that we're actually creating opportunities, providing after-school care, summer services, et cetera, for children in Kansas City. That's how we're going to make things better for this community, not in just talking points, but in action and making sure we're getting money where it's needed for basic services for people.
From those three, what is your priority? Housing, jobs, or education? Yeah.
For me?
Yeah. It's
Okay,
for you.
my priority of those three, that's like asking who's your favorite child, right? I like all of them. I'll just say this, education. Education made a world of difference in my life, right? We grew up poor, we moved around all the time, we were homeless when I was growing up, but my mother made sure I got to a good school when I was a child, when I was able to get to a good college. I went to law school, and everything just kind of kept happening. And my view is that what you really need to make sure is we're creating as many opportunities as possible to ensure that children get a good education. And if they can get a good education, what does that mean? It means often that they have stable housing, that their parent is employed. So they all relate, but I think fundamentally, what can we do to make sure our young people have opportunities to learn in safe spaces, and opportunities to learn where they can actually grow and be themselves, no matter their background. That's what I think is vital for us.
Thank you. Candidate Justice, please explain us your plan to put the Latino community on a firmer financial footing.
Absolutely. I think that, I mean, you're going to hear from both candidates, without question, that the issues that are the most important to that firmer financial footing, to making sure that we break down the years of inequity that are in our community, is working on those things, which are jobs, which is infrastructure that includes transportation and housing, and of course, education. And so one of the things, though, that I think is critically important that we have to focus on, and it's something that I've been very proud to have been doing for a very long time now, is how do all those things interrelate? Because oftentimes we say, you know what, we've just got to go out there and make sure we're creating jobs, jobs, jobs. And sometimes folks, especially at the state or the national level, will focus on that. Well, guess what? If you create jobs and they're only in another state, so far away from housing areas and away from transportation that you can't get there, what good is it for us? And also, what does it mean to create a job if you don't have a workforce that's ready to go to work? And so some of the very specific things that I'm going to be doing is, number one, I'm going to continue to try to attract those new job opportunities to Kansas City. But I'm going to make sure that when we're having those conversations, that we're going to be working with community partners like the one we have right here to make sure that we are making the connections between developing the workforce and creating the transportation opportunities to get to those jobs. But those big jobs are only one part of it, because we also have to make sure we're focusing on small businesses. Over 70% of our community, the income in our community, comes from small businesses. And we need to get the resources to create the ecosystem where we can all survive and really work together. Those are some of the biggest things we can do, and we can do it if we have all of those things working together at the same time.
Thank you. Candidate Lucas, what is your position on the city of Kansas City having size standards and net worth in regard to minority business enterprise and women business enterprise?
This is the question we get when we let the Hispanic Chamber and others ask. So I'll make sure, first I'll describe
It comes from there.
I'll describe the
Hispanic
policy
Chamber.
for us and then kind of where we go from there. Many of you will be familiar with affirmative action programs, and the goal really is to make sure that people from different communities have an opportunity to find work on projects where they've been historically discriminated from, both from a public works project to economic incentive projects, et cetera. In terms of size and net worth standards, the idea there is the program going to be one that creates opportunities for small businesses, growing businesses, et cetera, to get access to it? Or will we allow kind of, let's say, an Oprah Winfrey, who's worth $1 billion or more, to kind of open a new plumbing business and get all the contracts? My view is that we want to continue to allow this to be the sort of thing where smaller businesses have an opportunity. So what that means is that I think we need to continue to have size standards and net worth standards to make sure that if you or me or someone else opens a business tomorrow and is really hiring people from the community, they have an opportunity to get work. What I see all the time, and in the 3rd district where I'm from, but in districts all around the city, is that oftentimes your best employers of people from the neighborhood are your small businesses. The businesses that are actually looking to create new opportunities are those who are interacting every day, not the giant business that comes from another city or another state that just got the contract. So for that reason, I do think we need to continue to have size and net worth standards to make sure that we're achieving the goals of our programs, to create more opportunities for women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, et cetera, to make sure that they have this opportunity to get access to some of the important work we're doing every day in Kansas City. It's great to have an airport project. It's great to have buildings being built. But unless that progress is shared, we're not accomplishing our goals. And I want to make sure we're accomplishing those goals with small businesses represented within them.
Thank you. Jolie Justice, what is your position on the city of Kansas City having size standards and net worth in regard to minority business enterprise and
I believe we do need size and net worth standards, and it's something that we've had a chance to vote affirmatively for on the City Council. And these are tough conversations, and I have been a supporter of this, and I will continue to be a supporter of this. But I tell you what, this is only one small piece in the big puzzle, because we also have to make sure that we have a city that, in addition to the size and net worth standard, that we are continuing to create opportunities for our small businesses, for our minority and women-owned businesses. We need to make sure we have a city hall that is responding to the changing community. Oftentimes, we get folks who have a very difficult time even becoming certified as a small women or minority-owned business. We need to break down that red tape. You know, we 8 years ago had the opportunity to do a small business kind of road show where we went around the community and said, what are we doing right and what are we doing wrong? And we had some great ideas, and I appreciated that. And we cut some red tape at City Hall. It's time to dust that off, take a look at it again and say, okay, it's 8 years later. We've done some big things here in the city. But what are we doing now to make sure that the next generation of small businesses, the next generation of minority and women-owned businesses are having the same opportunities? What red tape still exists? What problems are we having in the different departments? How can we make it better? And we can do that if we continue having these conversations with the community. I think it's incredibly difficult for City Hall to address a lot of these issues on our own. The reality is you don't want us addressing these issues on our own. Instead, we need to continue this conversation. And I think one of the things that we can do is take the lessons that we've learned over the last 8 years and make sure that the programs that we do have are actually working for the community. And if they aren't working, let's toss them out and start over.
Thank you. Candidate Lucas, do you have any plan to address that project?
Yes. I mean, a few different things that we need to do to enhance opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses. I think first, we need to continue to invest in training, right? And continue to invest in more opportunities to train a workforce. So when we talk about opportunities, it can't just be education that ends at high school. We need to think about how we can get people into the trades. How can we get people into the workforce? How do we work with labor unions? How do we work with so many other groups that have the opportunity to say, we have a jobs need, let's try to create opportunities for these folks. And so that's one of the key steps that I think I want to take. Another thing that I've talked about a lot, and this goes back to housing, one of my loves, is How is it that we can make sure that when we're spending lots of money on things like housing, that we're creating more job opportunities? I'll give one example. One mistake I think this city made was a few years ago, we spent $10 million to demolish a lot of housing. And the problem is, as many of you know too, when they start to demolish your neighborhood, the next thing that happens is you get a bunch of new fancy houses, right, that are expensive, not built by people from your neighborhood, and then often not inhabited by people from your neighborhood. What I'd like to see is this city invest those millions of dollars instead on rehab, giving people opportunities to get work, getting people the opportunity, if they're needing a second chance in life, to get to work on houses, to work on rehab, to build more jobs and to build more opportunities. That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying jobs. Again, it's attracting and creating jobs that are accessible to more people in the workforce. It's not just saying we're creating a bunch of fancy jobs in a fancy tower somewhere. It's instead saying, how do we create opportunities for people in our communities?
Thank you. Candidate Jolie Justus, will you support city resources being used for the development of Southwest Boulevard Business District, similar to what they did for the 18th and Vine District?
This is a great conversation and one we've been having for a very long time with our monthly meetings, with our neighborhood meetings. This is a conversation that its time has come. And here's why. Number one, the cultural heritage, the rich history of this neighborhood needs to be elevated and celebrated. It needs to be small things like signs so that when you pull off the highway, you know you're coming into the west side, which, as we all know, is the best side. Thank you for telling me that over and over again. We also need to make sure that we are doing things that make sense, that not just provide that sense of place, but also are helping the neighborhood with amenities that we need. We've had long conversations about the importance of bringing tools like community improvement districts, like bringing beautification efforts. It is time for us to make those investments on Southwest Boulevard so that we can absolutely celebrate the cultural heritage, but also make sure that we're ready for the next generation of business and entrepreneurs and educational opportunities. And this is the perfect year to do this. We've got a 100-year celebration anniversary going on at the Guadalupe Center. Now is the time to do that, and I look forward to working with you to make sure that that happens.
Thank you. Candidate Lucas?
Yeah, short answer is absolutely yes. We need to spend, I think, the energy, the money, the effort that we've done to try to rejuvenate 18th and Vine here. I think we need to make sure that City Hall isn't just saying, we like you, this is nice, we'll come to an event, but is instead saying, how can we work with you to channel lots of economic development dollars to make sure that we're supporting what's happening here. A few ways to do it, though, because in some ways 18th and Vine is a cautionary tale as well. We can't just put a bunch of money here and say, right now it's the new Southwest Boulevard built by City Hall. You don't want that. What we need to do is first work with the businesses and the organizations that are here now and say, what can we do to help you? What can we do to enhance foot traffic? What can we do to help support public transit opportunities that are coming through this neighborhood? That's what I want to see. What I don't want to see is us change everything drastically. What I want to see is us say, we're here to help, but we want you to be the leaders of what's happening. If we were doing the 18th and Vine model, we might have that a different way in a way. What I want to see is us working collaboratively with folks in this neighborhood and beyond to say that this is one of the most exciting areas in our region, not just in Kansas City, Missouri. You have people from all around the region who come here for food, for culture, for entertainment, to work with the organizations at issue. The Cinco de Mayo celebration here at Guadalupe Centers the other day had lots of people here. What can we do to help support that? That's what I want to do. So the answer to the question is absolutely yes. I think the work that we do after that is to say, how are we there to help you, not just to take over, right? I want to be somebody who's working hand in hand, somebody who's listening, not somebody who's just telling you what you need.
Why you will do that now is if you were elected mayor, but you have been in the council since 2015.
Yeah. In short, first I would say that I think I have had the opportunity to help the community in a number of different situations. I think that's related both to neighborhood issues, neighborhood cleanups, right, how we're addressing things, but also longer range issues, like how are we developing this area to make sure that we're supporting small businesses, to make sure that we're supporting residents who live here now, right, the people who've invested in their houses, right, for years and years. And so what I would say is, yeah, we need to do that, but even more to the point, I think, what we need to do long term is see how can we actually get funding to support some of those key steps that we're talking about. I'm not interested so much in more conversation. What I'm interested in is saying, all right, businesses, what do you need? Is it new sidewalks? A lot of people would say yes. Right? Is it more access to better bus routes? A lot of folks would say yes. And I think the concrete step we need here is to make sure that we're actually supporting that funding as opposed to just saying we like the area.
Thank you. Regarding the transportation, candidate Jolie Justice, will you support some kind of transportation connector that will go east and west to give better access to the streetcar for residents in the west side, northeast, and east side communities?
Absolutely. This issue is one that I'm incredibly passionate about. I want to make sure that we have a city that is connected and working for everyone. In my work over the last 20 years as both a pro bono legal lawyer and then also as a city council person and a state senator, one of the things that I find often is that we can find a quality job, usually, for someone. We can find housing. We can find educational opportunities, but we never do it in such a way where there's a connection. There's not the transportation opportunities. Either we've got crumbling sidewalks and broken roads, or we don't have public transit access. And so absolutely I will increase that. And I'm going to do it through a few ways, and here's some tangible things. Number one, I envision a city where everybody is a 15-minute wait from frequent transportation. We can do that if we start to coordinate and plan better. And we've not done that to date because we have public works, we have parks, we have planning. We have the city manager's office. We have the streetcar authority. We have the Kansas City Area Transit Authority. And we need to start coordinating all of those things so that we're not just putting in another bus line, but we're putting in bus lines where people are actually using them. This is really critical. If we don't get this right, we're never going to be able to be the city that we all want. We're never going to feel the success that we've seen in Kansas City at every single neighborhood. And so one of the things that we can do, first of all, is create a Department of Transportation. And this is not a new bureaucracy. This is making sure that there is accountability, transparency, and that we are actually making decisions that really impact your lives. And so what do I mean by that? Well, I want you to be able to go on a website or to make a phone call or to go down to City Hall or when I visit you in your neighborhood, and I want you to be able to say, when is this new sidewalk going in? When is my new bus route coming in? And we give you a firm answer.
Candidate Justice, you said you will create a new Department of Transportation, but we already have one. Why you will create a new department, and can we afford that?
So we actually don't have a Kansas City Department of Transportation. We have a Missouri Department of Transportation, we have a federal Department of Transportation, a Kansas Department of Transportation. But what we don't have is someone who is bringing all of those things together on the city level. And maybe it's not a department. Maybe it's a staff member. Maybe it's someone who is actually connecting all of these things. But right now, here's what happens. We come up with these ideas. We've got to go resurface this road, and this road. We need to go out there and we need to put in this new bus line. And none of those decisions are being made by people actually talking to each other. It's time that we start to coordinate those efforts. It's time that you get a return on your investment. You have spent a lot of your time and your tax dollars supporting things like the GO bonds, making sure that we're working on PIAC projects. And one of the things that you should be able to do is know what we're spending your money on, how we're going to spend it moving forward, and you need to have a say in that. We need better coordination between those departments, and that's not something we have right now.
Thank you. Candidate Lucas, will you support a transportation connector between Kansas City sites?
Yeah, I think it's essential. If you think about certain corridors throughout our city, 39th Street, 27th Street, 18th Street, why don't we have better east-west connections? It's my view that as we've talked about even streetcar expansion further south, and I asked this at a single city council meeting maybe 2 years ago, I asked the streetcar authority, what are you doing to work with the KCATA, our bus system, to make sure that folks can actually catch the east-west bus so somebody who lives somewhere can hook up with streetcar and make it somewhere else faster? And actually, I got a little bit of pushback at the time. They said, well, we're just worried about this right now, but not some of the others. I think what we really need to think about, though, and I respectfully disagree, I don't think another either bureaucrat or individual or anything of that sort is actually good for us at City Hall. Already we do have the Public Works Department talk to the KCATA. We already have folks that communicate with each other. I'm not sure another staff position is necessary as much as us just basically listening to the residents and what they need. I'll give you an example. My sister lives on the far eastern edge of Kansas City, right? And she catches or caught the bus into downtown every day for an $11 an hour job. Her bus route was cut. She doesn't have the time to talk to or maybe even call the Department of Transportation person or the other person or anything of that sort. What needed to happen was before KCATA was cutting the bus route, they needed to talk to the community. They needed to have more collaboration. The mayor gets the chance to actually appoint people to that board. The mayor has the opportunity to have influence on city policy. In the Public Works Department, supposed to fix our roads. We have plans. My idea is we need to start executing on them. And we need to follow them, and we need to make sure we're responsive. What we don't need are more staffers at City Hall to slow everything down.
Do you agree with the plan of Jolie Justice about creating a new Department of Transportation, special for the English or Spanish?
No, that's all right.
Special for Kansas City?
So no, I do not. I think right now we have a lot of departments, a lot of groups. Sometimes in government, right, we're all quick to say, let's do something new and drastic, instead of saying, let's do what we're already doing right. My first approach to solving any of these issues is how do we make how do we make us more responsive? How are we actually carrying through on policies and executing? Instead of just saying, let's do more new stuff, let's actually make sure we're carrying out the policies we've already passed. Let's make sure we're actually being responsive to those who live in neighborhoods. Let's do that before we're saying, let's add another individual at City Hall whose purview we don't exactly know.
Let's change the order again, to be fair. In your first 90 days, Lucas, in office, will you consider and commit to creating a new task force to making Kansas City a more livable city for neighborhoods like in the Northeast, West Side, and East Side? Homicides are still at an all-time high. Candidates for mayor say they want to address the issue, but it is difficult at best. So what course will you take in making our community safer?
Right. So on the question of will I create a new task force to do so, the answer is actually no, because the voters elect a task force to do that, and that's called the City Council. Right? If we're talking about how to actually make life better in the Northeast, the East Side, South Kansas City, the Northland, what we're supposed to do is lead and talk about those issues every day. The problem with task forces, and there are, first of all, too many at City Hall, is that we often have these task forces, they go into meetings, they come up with plans, the plan either sits on a shelf and nothing ever happens, or the plan actually ends up excluding a certain neighborhood. Let's talk about the West Side, for example. We have a greater downtown area plan, but we also had a neighborhood plan here, and when they're in conflict, the downtown area plan seems to win. What good was that task force for the lots of people who spent all types of time, particularly from this neighborhood, the West Side, saying we want to have our voices heard? It actually disenfranchised people. What I want us to do is, at the city council level, be accountable to these important issues. And the reason I want it to be at the city council level is because we also control the money. What good is it having a task force of 15 people if they just give recommendations, everybody ignores it, and then we're spending all the money on something that nobody in the community wanted? My view is that the mayor's job is to lead the city council. That's what I've been able to do lots of times as a city councilman, getting enough votes to support any number of policies, how to make our incentive policy more fair and equitable, how to make sure we're not spending money on contracts without the council actually having some review to make sure they're fair and equitable and going to people in all communities, how to make sure that when we're looking at our annual housing committee budgets from the Community Development Block Grant, that we're adequately funding organizations like the Guadalupe Centers. That's what we need to do, not just have a task force that's actually excluding people, but instead having a city council that is acting in the interests of people in every part of our community, particularly those who work the hardest every day and who don't get their fair share of city resources.
But why you want to address that project now if you are part, as a current member of the public safety and neighborhood committees?
I would say that we are addressing it now. So I'm the chair of the Housing Committee. It's an exciting committee you should all watch all the time, right? We are talking about how we build more housing for folks who are working class and low income. In neighborhoods and public safety, we're talking about how we can do things like more efficiently and effectively pick up the trash, which is a basic service that everybody in Kansas City deserves. I think sometimes, frankly, the city needs to make sure we're focusing more on that stuff than some of our big ticket projects. The first 2 years of our city council term, I think we spent more time than we should have talking about airports and hotels and all these sorts of things than we were talking about how to pick up the trash in the neighborhoods or make sure people had access to quality housing or figure out how kids are educated. That's what I've been pushing my whole time on city council, and is in large part why I'm running for mayor now. Because we need to make sure that we're doing that. The basics matter. What keeps people in Kansas City matters. And that's what I'm continue fighting as mayor.
Yeah, but the crime rates are still there. So
Yep.
do you have any plan to decrease that rates?
Yes, lots. So on crime, I think first of all, we need to all recognize that our level of violent crime is unconscionable. One of the things, there are several issues that I'd like to see to address violent crime. One is resources, the second is relationships. In terms of resources, we need to make sure that we're funding not just neighborhood police officers, which is a distinction sometimes from how we're doing things now. What I'm talking about with neighborhood policing is making sure you have folks that actually have an interaction and an engagement with the community. Not just police flooding in a community whenever an incident occurs. We don't really want that. What we want are folks who know the community, folks who speak the languages in the community. So it doesn't sound like I'm pandering. I talk to folks in the Somali community in the Northeast area all the time who say they want to have positive relationships with the police. We need a lot more of that. In terms of relationships, we need to make sure that we have those relationships with leaders in the community and the police to make sure we're addressing these issues long term. And when we talk about resources, it can't just be talking about policing. I met with the Aim for Peace program this morning, talking about how we can create more mental health services, how we can create more trauma-related services. Because if you have somebody shot down the street, that has an impact on a kid who's 15 or 16. We need to do more of that long-term to address these crime issues. And to your question of, have you done it already? Just seeing if you asked that. I think we have. Right? I've been a leader in making sure we have social workers, more social workers at every police patrol division. I think we need more school resource officers, and not just school resource officers available to the public schools. Guadalupe Centers High School deserves a school resource officer. We need to make sure we're funding more of those situations so people have the opportunity to actually interact and have, I think, a better relationship long-term with the police community than what we have today.
Thank you. Jolie Justice, what is your plan to make Kansas City safer?
You know, the question, started with this concept of what are you going to do to focus specifically on the safety of very specific neighborhoods. And so first of all, I want to say to that end, as your next mayor, I am going to focus first of all on making sure that City Hall comes to you. And it's something that I've been doing for the last 4 years on the City Council through either quarterly meetings in the neighborhood or making sure that I have regular meetings with individual organizations, walking the actual neighborhoods and touring and seeing what's happening, bringing folks from City Hall who are problem solvers, whether it's codes or trash or public safety, to you. So I think that's first and foremost. We must have that happen. And you will have someone in the first 90 days who is your liaison to all neighborhoods. You will have someone you will know you can call and say, this is the person who's going to solve my problems for me. And so that's number one. But the reason we're doing this is because we want safer neighborhoods. And to have safer neighborhoods, we're going to have to focus on several things. The first and foremost is getting to those systemic issues that lead to crime in the first place. So we do need to focus on making sure that we are funding our mental health services, that we are funding addiction services. And we also need to make sure that we have resources in the hands of our police officers so that when they interact with an individual who's in crisis, that they know what to do. We've had this conversation several times at the Westside Can Center about making sure that all of the resources are readily available in the hands of our police officers so that they know immediately what they can do when they find someone in crisis. And we can do that if we continue some of the great public-private partnerships that we have in our community. We also can do it if we add more neighborhood police officers. I want to work as the next mayor of Kansas City on the police board to work with the city council and the city manager to get a budget that gets us to the point where we have 2 additional neighborhood resource officers. Why is that important? Because you've seen the impact that that can have in your community at the Westside Can Center, and every single neighborhood throughout our community deserves that. And so that's one of the things that I'll be focusing on, making sure that we get those folks in place so we're not just responding to crises, but we're also going out and creating the relationships that we need in order to make all of us feel safe.
Will you change the budget at City Hall for mental health?
We absolutely need to look at that. And it's not just changing the budget at City Hall and with mental health. I mean, we need to make sure that the money that we are getting right now as it relates to health care is being spent on mental health. And then we're not using it in other spaces. We also need to continue to work down whatever dollars are left out there, because guess what? The federal government and the state government have turned their back on us when it comes to mental health. We have seen waiting lists that continue to grow and grow and grow. I know at the state there's not even, I think, a scenario right now where they list how many days you have to wait to get into a mental health bed, because there's just not any beds available ever. And so one of the things we have to make sure that we do is those dollars that we've already committed to, that we're spending them wisely, and that is my focus. I understand that the only way we get to these issues is not by coming up with some creative idea out of City Hall, but by really getting to the root issues within the community about how trauma affects us all, and adding that layering component of making sure that we are giving the services to the individuals who are committing the crimes, giving services to individuals when they're coming back into our community, and making sure first and foremost that we are funding those things necessary that keeps the crimes from taking place in the first place.
Thank you. Candidate Lucas, will you make mental health your priority if you were elected mayor?
Yes. I think it certainly in our list of priorities is high up there, and it's one that we've drastically underfunded. I'll just tell you a little story because I have a little bit of time. When I was in high school, and we moved around a lot, mainly in East Kansas City, there was a shooting right down the street, 2 doors down. And I asked my mother, I'm like, did you know somebody got shot and killed yesterday there? And I still remember a response to this day, because it was just kind of like, well, that's another day in the neighborhood. That's not normal, right? And there are lots of kids every day in Kansas City who are growing up with that. There are people who are living with that. When we talk about mental health services, what I'm actually talking about is something even broader than just core mental health. It's addressing trauma in communities. It's making sure that before, when there's a shooting in one block, right, that we're not just letting folks retaliate, we're instead flooding that area. This is what Aim for Peace does, and saying, hey, before you're picking up a gun, 17-year-old who's responding to your buddy who got shot, let's talk about it. Let's make sure that we're actually trying to do some sort of conflict resolution to ensure that we're not actually perpetuating the same types of concerns long term. That's the key and core investment we need. In terms of broader mental health, yeah, I mean, the biggest mental health institution in this area is the Jackson County Jail. That's a problem for me. That's why I've stood against certain ordinances like the panhandling ordinance and others. We need to decriminalize mental illness. We need to stop making it so we're arresting people all the time when really what they need is treatment. We need to make sure that if we're dealing with nuisance violations, what we're really dealing with is that underlying issue. And I think mental health is at the core of all of those things. Trauma is at the core of it. And I'll just say this, because we can't change families tomorrow, and I'm not going to pretend to. The thing that we can do, though, is give people opportunities, right? Opportunities for better health care, opportunities for better access, opportunities for jobs. So while I agree that we need to hit those core functions, what's the difference that it made for me? I grew up in a neighborhood that had violence around me, didn't have a father in my home. But the difference was education, was that opportunity. I think it's a mix of those, making sure we're providing adequate health care and really investing in public health, and then also making sure that we're creating opportunities for people long term.
If you are elected, are you going to increase the budget for the mental health?
Yeah, yes, and the way that we do that is by not actually stealing from the budget for mental health. The way that we do that as well is making sure, so by that I mean adequately funding our safety net institutions, like Truman Medical Center, like Samuel Rogers, making sure that we're actually getting money there so for people who need access. Another thing that I don't think we need to do is spend in excess of $10 million, $30 million on things like a new jail. That's what we're talking about doing right now at City Hall. That's the current conversation. My view is if we can spend a lot of money on institutions that actually can help people, right, get back into society, actually improve them, why are we spending it on mass incarceration like it's 1985 right now? That's how I do it. For me, it's not so much a question of, do you want more? Everybody, every candidate you ever meet will say, we want more for every good thing. The question is, where are your priorities? Where are you going to cut from? For me, I would say I'm not putting money into a jail. What I'm going to put money into is mental health. I'm going to put money into supporting businesses that hire real employees from our community. That's the difference we need.
Thank you. Now we would like to hear you, the audience. Ramona? Is someone there with the microphone to get to the audience? You have the questions. You already have the questions? Thank you. Both of you have been on City Council. What is your current plan for homelessness in Kansas City? Justice or Quinton? Quinton.
Okay.
It's either way. Oh, thank you. It's kind of a continuation of the last question, right? The first thing you have to do is recognize that there are lots of people who are homeless every day, who are dealing with long-term addiction issues, long-term housing insecurity issues. What can we do to address those? On the addiction point, we do need to make sure there's adequate funding to make sure that folks can go to an institution, can go through rehab, and can come out and get real opportunities long-term. That's a big part of that. Because we had a debate at this City Council, and Councilwoman Justice and I were on the same side, so this isn't a distinction point. But it's this idea that, yeah, instead of incarcerating folks, what can we do to make sure we're actually creating healthcare opportunities for them long-term after that? Another thing, I think, to address homelessness, particularly in connection with families, when my family was homeless, it was because my mother didn't have a job, right? And we were staying on couches, we were moving around, the kids were staying different places. For me, there are two things you need to do to help fight homelessness. One is making sure you have access to good job opportunities, including transportation to them. Two is that we're creating more affordable housing opportunities in our city, that we're making more units that are available for people. And there's a story in the news today about a new project that's going to charge $1,500 a month rent, right? Why is the city playing in that game instead of actually creating more opportunities for $400 a month, $500 a month, $600 a month? Because the amazing thing was, when my mom got a job, we were still homeless part of the time, because you need to have a place you can actually afford. That's how I think we can address it more concretely. Creating housing opportunities, addressing mental health concerns. That starts to hit at the problem largely. And then making sure that you do have access to health care in more situations. There are so many people who one bad life incident takes you out of being able to pay your rent, takes you out of being able to afford a car or anything like that. We need to make sure that we're making sure that health care isn't one of those that knocks people back.
Thank you. Candidate Justice.
Absolutely. So a couple of things. Let's talk first about an example that we had right here on the west side that I think is incredibly important. We had a homeless camp. We continue to have homeless camps, but we had one homeless camp in particular that had become a crisis. One, because the trash, the violence, what was coming out of the camp was really interfering with the safety and the quality of life of the neighborhood, but also the living conditions within the camp were deplorable. They were unhealthy and unsafe. And so we had a problem. And one of the things that I was really excited about is we worked with the KCPD. We worked with, at the time, it was a pilot project of a social worker that I had a relationship with at KCPD, to have basically a good old-fashioned social work fair within the camp. So what do I mean by that? We went down on several occasions, and we had meetings with the individuals who were living in the camp to talk about what services were available to help get out of the situation. And we did not get 100% acceptance. Without question, there were individuals who were not interested. But you know what? Every time we went, there was someone who stepped up and you said, you know what? I think I'm going to accept your offer. And we were able to get an individual who had really debilitating health issues into a nursing home setting. We were able to get one man who frankly just wanted to get back home because he wasn't from Kansas City. We were able to get him a phone call and assistance to get back to his family on the East Coast. These are things we can do through good old-fashioned social work. But that's not enough. It can't stop there. We have to also continue to coordinate the services that are available. We have a lot of homelessness services in this community, but unfortunately, we don't always coordinate at the level we should, and there's a lot of individuals who don't want to engage in those services because of it. So we need to make sure that through our health department, through our public safety, we're coordinating those better. Finally, we need to make sure that we have housing opportunities, and we need to make sure that we're stabilizing housing so that people don't lose their homes in the first place. And we can do that through our continued work with Legal Aid of Western Missouri and the Adopt a Neighborhood program. These are things we can scale up and make sure we have in every single neighborhood across the city.
Thank you. The next question is, what is your position on community policing and why? Lucas.
I generally support community policing. The problem is we got to talk about what does it mean. Right? In government, we spend a lot of time on buzzwords. We're not talking about what it's about. For me, I'm informed by policing by a few different things, one of which is that I've had the fortune of doing several KCPD ride-alongs, usually in the East Zone, but I've done some in the Central Zone as well, or one in the Central Zone. Most nights, police officers are just answering a call, then driving somewhere else, answering a call, right, and jumping around like that all night. And then we get behind, then adrenaline gets up, right, and you're not building a real relationship with a community. My view on community policing, I'd really go with an idea of neighborhood policing, precision policing. This idea that we want officers that actually have an interaction and an engagement with the neighborhood long term. Have officers who actually know what's going on. Have officers who know that if there are kids playing in the park every night at 10 o'clock, that's not criminality, right? That's just kids that are playing ball, right? And that you don't need to call out 10 other cars because there's a potential riot. Real thing that happened, by the way, once. And so that's what I see as neighborhood policing. Neighborhood policing is about connections, relationships. It's knowing that there's a homeless camp somewhere. It's knowing what the issues are in connection with it, and it's giving officers the time to actually reach out to the resources that can help people. If there's an issue, let's say with a homeless camp somewhere, and there was a fight that broke out, instead of perhaps saying we need to arrest everybody, maybe we need social workers to come in, to the point before. Maybe we actually need more trauma care services after a shooting. That's what I see as neighborhood policing. I wholeheartedly support it, and I think that's a better way to address policing than just necessarily having an army of officers who come in and police communities in a way that's not saying we're with you and we're part of it, but instead saying we're outsiders coming to just fix something.
Thank you. Next member of the audience says, last night I attended a meeting at the Hispanic News, and the purpose was to review the Southwest Boulevard plan done with the help of the UMKC students, urban planning, and HEDC. Can we expect any help from you and your staff with implementing it? Julie Justice?
Absolutely. This is one of the most exciting things that I have heard happening in a very long time, and it's really the fruition of several conversations that many of us in this room have had for a very long time. This is the type of community-based work where we are sitting down and identifying what the needs are, identifying what our long-term goals are, and making sure that we come up with a plan for our own neighborhood and how we continue to succeed. And so I'm really excited to hear that that's continuing to move forward. You will have my absolute full support as we continue to have these conversations. And I also want to make sure that you have the knowledge and the confidence that you're going to have a liaison at City Hall, someone who is assigned to make sure that this project goes through to completion and that we do it right and that we do it in the way that you want it to be done.
Thank you. Will you support the project, Lucas?
Yes, not only will I support the project, you know, I talked about being a listener before. I actually attended a big presentation of students, right, HEDC, Guadalupe Centers, KC Hispanic News, about that project. And when I attended it, I didn't say a word. I had the fortune of just listening to the presentations, listening to the community, frankly, getting ideas that were some of the most transformative in our whole city. So I think the work that you're doing in terms of the Southwest Boulevard corridor is something that helps Van Brunt. It's something that helps the Northland. It's something that we can copy in every part of the city. I will absolutely be supportive, and the first step of support is making sure I lend an ear to what's happening. I've done that already in connection with that project. We all remember it was kind of a cold day, too. But nevertheless, we were there. We were listening to the students. We were listening to community members. We were listening to what the needs really were. That's how we come up with better policy. It's not what we do at City Hall. It's not what they do in Jefferson City, and Lord knows it's not what they do in Washington. It's instead actually listening to the community from the ground up, what community needs are, what needs funding, what needs our attention, and I'll absolutely work hand in hand to make sure that happens.
Jolly Justice, thank you. Jolly Justice, as mayor, how will you work across the state lines to promote a regional economy and growth? Do you have a regional approach?
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that we have that a lot of times is looked at as sort of something that holds us back rather than a positive is all the different dividing lines in this community. And I'm excited to say that one of the things I do best is bringing people together to talk about collaboration, whether it's at the regional level or otherwise. And that means bringing every voice to the table, even voices you disagree with. And that's a really hard thing to do. But I think that's the way we're absolutely going to keep this city moving forward. So what does that mean exactly? Well, number one, I think we have to come around a couple of issues to have that conversation on. I think there's two in particular that make a lot of sense. The first one is the transportation conversation. Because right now, one of the things that's holding us back being able to get jobs, being able to have housing opportunities, is that we are a disconnected region, not just a disconnected city. So I'd like to have a conversation with our regional elected officials and business people about how we make sure that as we create new jobs and as we stimulate this economy, that we are making sure we are creating the transportation that is getting people to and from work, getting people to and from school, and that we're sharing the financial burden of that equally. That's not something that we've always done. We need to have that conversation. Additionally, we are stronger when we work together. If we create an ecosystem that supports and provides resources to small businesses throughout the region, it's going to be something that makes all of us thrive. So we have to have that conversation. The other thing that we need to make sure that we're doing, though, is we can't keep stealing jobs from each other. We need to end the border war. And we can do that if we have conversations with elected officials across county lines, state lines, but we also have to create an atmosphere where we're keeping our truce. And that's something that we need to make sure we put into this conversation is that once we start down this road together, we understand that we're all in it together and that we are stronger when we are all working in that manner.
Thank you. Do you need to repeat the question?
No, I think I have it in terms of regional collaboration. I absolutely support regional collaboration. I think it's key. We need to make sure we're talking to each other, et cetera. But the music stops when you realize, well, wait, we do talk to each other, right? Mayor James meets with the mayor of Overland Park in Kansas City, Kansas, and governors from the other state, et cetera. So what is it different that we need to do? I think what we need to do is make sure that first, we're not perpetuating bad policy just in Kansas City, Missouri. We talk about transportation, but when we talk about how we do incentives, we've incentivized projects that are far off bus lines. We've incentivized projects that are in far-flung different parts of the city. So it's kind of galling for us to say, Kansas City, Kansas, how dare you actually incentivize this project that's not on a bus line if we're doing the same thing with a project at 150 Highway in Holmes, for example. And so I think one step that we need to do is to make sure that we're actually following good policy ourselves. We have to make sure we're following good incentive policy on tax breaks. I think we need to be a regional leader to say that when we're giving away tax breaks, it's not to build luxury housing. It's not just to attract jobs that are high income. It's instead to make sure we're helping communities. And if we're going to incentivize housing, we have to make sure that it's in areas that are already on public transit. We can save ourselves the expense of running a new bus if we actually just, have housing and if we support housing in areas that are already lived in and developed. That's the sort of work I want to see long term. So absolutely, I'll continue to talk to people everywhere. When we talk about collaboration, I think I've been exceptional at it because on city council, time and time again, on important issues, be it the airport and transparency, be it talking about incentives, talking about minimum wage, I've led that collaboration. I've been able to get enough council votes to make sure we're getting real things done all the time. And I'll continue to do that. Collaboration starts at home. You have to make sure that Kansas City's working in a unified effort. And then we go to other cities and say, look at our model. Look at what we can succeed with together.
Thank you. The next question for you, to change the order again. With increased tourism to Kansas City, what is your plan for recycle and to preserve the environment?
A few different things for recycling and then preserving the environment, and a few different thoughts on that. First, with recycling programs, we need some help in Kansas City. I think we make it too hard. Not only do we have our residential recycling issues, but to drop off things like glass, for example. Right? You have folks that sometimes have to leave Kansas City. They go to a place in KCK or many other areas to try to actually take care of core basic recycling issues. We need to make sure we're integrating recycling. We need to make sure we're integrating, frankly, good environmental policy into more of what we're doing in the trash refuse world of City Hall. We're not doing enough now. One other issue, though, that I think about when I talk about environmentalism in Kansas City is that we need to talk about sprawl. We need to talk about the costs of overbuilding sometimes and building things in very different ways. When we do that, we're adding expenses to trash pickup, recycling pickup. We're getting people further away from opportunities to actually get better access to recycling, trash, etc. And so what I'd like to see us do is create more neighborhoods that are connected. In different parts of the city, we can make sure as we're approving new projects that we actually require walkability in connection with those projects, that we're actually linking neighborhoods, that we're not actually having development that's far-flung and that the city's always subsidizing and supporting. So I think the best thing we can do long-term to help environmental policy in Kansas City is to be more responsible with how we're building Kansas City, to look at our building codes, et cetera, to say how are we being environmentally sound. And as we're talking about trash and recycling, to make sure that recycling is a fundamentally central part of the trash conversation all the time. We had a meeting today that lasted 2.5 to 3 hours that was about trash itself, just trash. And a question came up, what about recycling? And people said, we'll deal with that later. Right? We need to stop punting that further down. We need to make sure we're addressing those core issues more often.
Thank you. Julie Justice.
So obviously recycling is a key component in the issue that we're facing with climate change, but it's really a lot broader than that. And so I would attack it a few different ways. Number one, Kansas City really leads the way on issues relating to climate change and sustainability. We've made some big decisions that are going to make a big difference in this city. But the reality is that we are actually listed as number 5 in the least resilient cities for the coming climate change. And we've seen that through flooding. We've seen that through increasingly crazy weather patterns. And so we're going to need to make sure that we do more than just recycling. So let's break it down a little bit. Well, number one, we as a city council, and I'm incredibly excited about this, have actually passed an ordinance now that says all of our city's electricity is going to come from renewable sources by the year 2020. This is big news. Kansas City is leading on this, and that's a big deal for the future of our community. But this would be a lost opportunity if we didn't make sure that we weren't training the young men and women of Kansas City in blue and green collar jobs to help with this new economy. So we can't just talk about this in a vacuum. We have to make sure that folks understand that we are going to be taking these problems and using them as opportunities. So that's something that we can do immediately today. The second thing that we need to do is back to the transportation issue. You know, one of the biggest problems that we have in Kansas City is it relates to air quality, which impacts communities of low income and impacts brown and black communities more than any other community, is the amount of air quality problems that we have. And we can start to improve that by getting folks out of cars, by making sure that we have more frequent bus transportation, by making sure that people have sidewalks that are safe to walk down. We can do all those things together. And we should also continue to make sure that we're tackling the recycling issue. And one of the biggest things that I want to do for Kansas City is make sure that recycling is not just available to single-family homes, because the folks who live in multi-family housing pay the same taxes as we do, and they should get the same services. So I want to make sure that we're also bringing recycling to our multi-family homes.
Thank you. Let's give you the chance to make your closing statement. Quinton Lucas.
Thank you to all of you for being here tonight. I want to particularly thank our organizations. Univision, Telemundo, NY, KC Hispanic News give so much of the community an opportunity to be engaged and involved in City Hall. And I thank you all for that, and I hope you continue to do that, and I'm happy to sit down for an interview again anytime soon. This is an important election in Kansas City, and I think what we're working on is the future of Kansas City. What I've talked about today is where I come from in terms of what I care about. I care about neighborhoods, and I've shown that by standing up for your neighborhoods, even if it wasn't in my city council district. I've shown that for caring about people of all backgrounds. You know, the other day somebody came to me and said, Quentin Lucas, I hear you're the candidate for poor people. And I said, well, yes. I'm the candidate for poor people. I'm the candidate for people who make good money. I'm the candidate for everyone who understands that we're all in this together. Kansas City will only be better if we talk about and address long-standing issues that have held us apart. Income inequality, public safety, access to education, how to get past discrimination that has too often left black and brown communities behind. And how is it that we build housing? How do we build job opportunities? How can we create better opportunities for job training? I'm somebody who's shown on city council that ability to collaborate. I think the answers for all of our problems are not in Jefferson City. I think the answers are in our neighborhoods. I think the answers are with you. I'm somebody who's listening. I'm somebody who'll be a good leader for the next generation, and I'd appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Jolie Justice.
Once again, I want to thank you for this opportunity to be back here tonight and have these important community conversations. This is not the first time we've sat here together and had these conversations, and this will not be the last. I'm running for mayor of Kansas City because I want to make sure that we have success and quality of life that is felt in the neighborhood level regardless of where you live within our 319 square miles. And we can do that by doing a few things. Number one, it's time to bring City Hall to you. It is too hard. I have sat down at City Hall for 4 years now and watched you take time out of your day to come down to address small issues like permits, like sidewalks. But you've also come down and spent your entire day to fight, things that are not good for your neighborhoods. We need to be bringing that to you. There needs to be more interaction at the neighborhood level. And that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years as your city council person, by making sure that you have opportunities to come to the Tony Aguirre Center and let us know what's working and what's not working. By walking with you down your sidewalks to see which ones are broken and which ones we need to fix. And the good news is that we're fixing them. We're starting to make that progress. But our success in this city is not going to be done until everybody feels that, because what you see when you walk out of your house in the morning is the most important issue to you through the rest of the day. And we're not going to be able to have a decrease in violent crime in this community or an increase in educational opportunities until we address all of these things. And that's exactly what I'm going to do as your next mayor. I'm going to make sure that I am in your neighborhoods addressing your issues like I've been doing for the last 13 years. And I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Thank you, both candidates. I want to thank you all on behalf of Guadalupe Centers and the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Greater Kansas City for being here. I want to thank you, the candidates, for being here in the Latino community. Thank you. My best wishes with you.